Home. Anti-homosexuality law will be weaponized in 2026 election, experts Sunday, April 7, 2024. A panel of 5 constitutional court judges upheld the anti-gay law in Kampala April 3, 2024. Photos S. Abubaker Lubowa by Chris P Kayonga. What you need to know. Critics fear that homosexuality could be weaponized against the opposition ahead of the 2026 general election as fears grow that the campaigns could veer off an issue-based campaign and pander towards the politics of slander and nitpicking as major issues such as abject poverty, soaring unemployment, and ailing hospital infrastructure will be placed on the back burner. Uganda's Constitutional Court on April 3 elected not to annul or suspend the Anti-Homosexuality Act that includes the death penalty for certain same-sex acts, but voided some provisions that it viewed as inconsistent with certain fundamental human rights. The law, which was assented to in May 2023, is viewed to be among the harshest anti-gay laws and has drawn condemnation from rights campaigners and sanctions from Western nations. But in a country whose electorate largely views the practice as part of an immoral and repugnant practice transplanted from the West, the subject of homosexuality in Uganda has elicited a combustible cultural clash pitting a large ultra-conservative faith-leaning electorate against rights practitioners. Critics fear that homosexuality could be weaponized against the opposition ahead of the 2026 general election as fears grow that the campaigns could veer off an issue-based campaign and pander towards the politics of slander and nitpicking as major issues such as abject poverty, soaring unemployment, ailing hospital infrastructure and rising taxes, among others, will be placed on the back burner. Mwambutsia Ndebesa, a political historian who has taught at Makerere University, says when homosexuality becomes a political weapon and becomes a campaign issue, it goes into the public sphere, it becomes a discussion point and even diverts attention from the real issue of development and bad governance. He adds, they can weaponize it in such a manner that the ruling is done towards elections and fuel emotions and sentiments. It is an issue that I see will continue to be weaponized. We have seen the Speaker of Parliament using it as a scapegoat to avoid accountability. It is not about human rights per se, it is about pulling down each other. Mwambutsia says politicians will frame this subject as extremely pernicious, which poses an existential threat to the moral fabric of the country. Petitioner Andrew Mwenda, right, speaks to journalists outside court after the ruling. Political mileage. The recent Parliament exhibitions on the microblogging site X, which captured public imagination after it exposed allegations of corruption and profligacy of the National Assembly, is instructive. To fend off rising public antipathy and concerns raised by the leader of opposition, Joel Zenyani, Speaker Anita Among, told the House that the campaign to malign Parliament and her character was sponsored by homosexuals. Parliament chaired by Speaker Anita Among, right, in session. Photo, file. I will never give you an answer based on hearsay or rumor-mongering, and we are not going to run this house on rumor-mongering. Me to answer you on rumor-mongering on things you have cooked on social media because I have said no to bum shafting, I will not, she told the plenary. President Museveni later came to the defense of the Speaker, claiming that those behind the Parliament exhibition are not mistake-makers but outright traitors working for wrong foreigners like homosexuals and imperialists. How can you talk so much on social media about Anita Among instead of those traitors? I'm getting intelligence and we're going to expose those traitors. Nicholas Opio, who is a human rights lawyer and was among the petitioners at the Constitutional Court, tells Sunday Monitor that it is fashionable for leaders to frame homosexuality as a major election campaign theme. President Museveni accused his longtime friend and Prime Minister Amama Mbabazi of being funded by homosexuals. In the last election they did everything possible to paint People Power and Bobi Wine as a homosexual-driven group. So, the narrative about the LGBTQI community in this country is not just a legal issue, it is also a deeply political issue. As President Museveni has shown, it is used to go after your opponents because you want to paint your opponents in bad light knowing how the population feels about this issue, he says. Opio says homosexuality has been used to deflect the spotlight on important subjects such as corruption. It has also become a diversion each time there is deep scrutiny of our institutions, people spring up allegations of homosexuals, a very small tiny minority in this country. That they are behind, for example, the scandal in Parliament. That it is being paid for by LGBTQI folks. Bobi Wine gave a BBC interview where he was confronted about this issue and where he said some things where he left people more upset than clarify his position on these matters, so that if he speaks again perhaps, he will speak with more clarity, he adds. Opio says for the sake of political survival, politicians cannot be ambiguous on the subject of homosexuality. It is a case of you are damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you want to be very clear about this issue, you can only survive politically, you can only survive if you take the side of those who hate LGBTQI folks. But if you want to be clear on you stand defending the fundamental rights of LGBTQI persons in Uganda, it is going to be tough for you. NUP leader Robert Kyagulanyi, alias Bobi Wine, addresses supporters in Mayuge district on September 4, 2023. Photo, file youth vote. However, Opio believes that as the country heads into the next election, the LGBTQI issue will gradually dissipate and other issues that are pressing Ugandans every single day will become the main themes of discussion. Bobi Wine will be able to maintain that wave among the young people even though he loses some, because he is going to be painted as a pro-gay candidate. Because I don't think the gay people in this country are the problem we have in this country and the reason why we don't have good schools, why we don't have drugs in hospitals. He says. He also says the sticky issue of succession will stick out like a sore thumb in the 2026 presidential election. When we go into elections, these issues are going to be much more prominent. But don't forget we are going into the sunset years of President Museveni, so the question of transition is going to be a really important topic. Is the NRM, or President Museveni, preparing this country for transition, or is he going to risk implosion, ethnic tension and violence by hanging on to power much longer than people think he should? Those questions I think will become more important and prominent to the vast majority of Ugandans than the question of LGBTQI, Opio says. Opio adds that the law could be used as a sieve to determine not only the presidential election but across constituencies. Hun Fox Odoi came back to Parliament by sheer luck. I think he is going to face this issue when he goes back to his constituency. I can tell ever since these matters went to court, he has never been able to go back to his constituency. There is a real political cost for anybody who stands in defense of the LGBTQI community, and the only way to survive is to be ambiguous. But ambiguity doesn't help you as well with development partners who want clarity on these issues, he opines. Yusuf Sirankuma, a researcher and lecturer on cultural and literary studies, based in Germany, says candidates who receive donations and support from Western liberal democracies will find it difficult to navigate the subject of homosexuality, which will be drummed up as a major campaign slogan. Weaponisation. During a BBC interview in December 2023, Bobi Wine claimed that the anti-homosexuality law was enacted and supported by some lawmakers within his NUP party who work with Gen Museveni to target the opposition and crack down anyone perceived to be friendly to the gay community. The biggest elephant in the room is how do you respond to the homosexuality question, and Bobi Wine has no response, because to respond explicitly to resonate with the constituency at home would damage his standing with the international community. He doesn't want to do that, and Abed Bwanika Kimanya Kabonera County MP fully understands that and is ready to school him that if you attacked our constituency over money, we have so much we can push back and we are ready to use homosexuality as a weapon to fight back, argues Sirankuma. Sirankuma says the smear campaign is part of the playbook in Uganda's politics. One of the things politicians try to do is to gaslight their opposition. It is how to overwhelm them with rumors and gossip about them. For example, when one candidate stood for the position of mayor in Kampala, one of the chemicals thrown at him was that he was gay, and it worked quite successfully. One of the chemicals Ugandan politicians use, and it is not limited to Museveni and the opposition, even among the opposition as we are seeing right now with Abed Bwanika using it. So, it is a chemical that is available to politicians to use. You can throw it at any politician you dislike and say they are pro-homosexuality and that will damage their standing locally, he says. Sirankuma says the subject of homosexuality and the attendant cultural debate and clash could pit the West against countries like Uganda, which has for long been viewed as an erstwhile point man of the West in the volatile Great Lakes. With a deficit budget and soaring debt nearing distress, the West and policy wonks at the United States State Department in Washington will likely use the subject of homosexuality to reshape foreign policy and roll out stringent conditions to give aid and grants to poor countries like Uganda. And one of the cultural debates of our time is where a politician stands on the issue of sexual minorities. It is a question not only being discussed in Uganda but it's being discussed in Europe and other places. To appear to be winning the cultural war, you have to find a battleground and the battleground is Uganda, Sirankuma opines.